After the very important map, filter, and reduce methods, we still have some more methods to learn, which are also super important and used all the time. So in this lecture, we're going to talk about the find method. So as the name says, we can use the find method to retrieve one element of an array based on a condition. So let's again use our movements. And so find, and just like the other methods that we've been talking about, the find method also accepts a condition. And just like the other array methods we've been talking about, the find method also accepts a callback function, which will then be called as the method loops over the array. Alright, so find is basically just another method that loops over the array, but then it does something different. And in this case, what the find method does is to retrieve an element of the array. So, as always, the current element of the iteration is the movement, and then here we specify a condition. So let's say movement less than 0. So basically, this is here a withdrawal, right? So a negative movement. So you see that just like the filter method, the find method also needs a callback function that returns a Boolean. So the result of this is of course either true or false. Now, unlike the filter method, the find method will actually not return a new array, but it will only return the first element in the array that satisfies this condition. So basically, in other words, the first element in the array for which this operation here becomes true. And so basically this here will return the first withdrawal. So first withdrawal is this. So let's log the movements again to the console. And then let's also log the first withdrawal. And so indeed, minus 400 here is the very first value that appears in the array that is negative. Okay? So, as you see, the find method is a bit similar to the filter method, but there are two fundamental differences. First, filter returns all the elements that match the condition, while the find method only returns the first one. And second, and even more important, the filter method returns a new array, while find only returns the element itself and not an array. Okay? So make sure that you understand this fundamental difference. Now, this example here is not really exciting, and so let's now take it to the next level and start actually working with our array of objects. So that's this accounts array, remember? So this array which contains the 4 objects where each of them is one account. And as I mentioned earlier, this is a pretty common data structure in JavaScript, and so let's now work with this together with the find method. Because in this context, the find method actually becomes really useful. So that's because using find, we can now basically find an object in the array based on some property of that object. And so that's really cool. So let me show it to you. So let's create a variable called account, and it's going to be accounts. So all the accounts dot find, and then our callback. And so as we loop over accounts, each of the current elements is one account. Okay? And so now let's say we want to select one of the accounts by the name. Now, this disappeared here, so let's bring it back. Okay. So let's say we want to get the account where the owner is Jessica Davis, right? So we can simply do account.owner equals Jessica Davis. So let's see. Just the account. And indeed, we get now only this object. And this is really, really powerful of arrays and objects. so where one array contains multiple objects which all have a similar structure. So all of them here have an owner, have a movement, a pin, a username, and so on and so forth. So using the find method, we can then search this array basically to find an object that matches a certain property that we already know. So in this case, that property that we know is the name. All right, and so we simply compare Jessica Davis here with the account owner. And whenever this condition here is true, well, then that object is returned. So usually the goal of the find method is to just find exactly one element. And therefore, we usually set up a condition where only one element can satisfy that condition. And so that's why we used the equal operator here. Okay, so if the owner names are unique, then this equal operator here will only ever match one account with this name here. All right, and we will actually use this in the next couple of lectures to implement the login feature and also some other features. Now, I'm going to leave it to you here as a challenge to implement this functionality using the for-off loop, just like we have been doing it with some of the other methods like map and filter. So we have also been implementing these using the for-off loop just to see the difference. But now I'm not going to do that, but I'm leaving it here as an idea for you to do that. Now anyway, let's go now to the next video and actually start to implement the login functionality.